Surprised? Couldn't be that you didn't expect to see me. I know everything you do and everything you think. It isn't quite clear, is it?
Oh, she does know what I'm talking about.
Oh, but it confuses you, doesn't it? Perhaps you should see a doctor. I'm going to put an end to all that confusion.
I was a promising and popular student at school. My grades in general were pretty good, eventually being appointed head girl. Upon admission to art college, I was in rapture when the head of faculty informed me I was one of the most interesting young students he'd come across. If nothing else, it certainly added to my developing confidence. At home, the relationship with my parents was confusing and fractured. I was angry with my mother's submission to my father and began to resent my father's dominating nature. With a growing sense of identity, strength, and independence, I finally departed the security of home. Although typical of the majority of other young students, I soon became restless, unruly, and alienated from my surroundings. The cause, which in part would dictate the course of my adult life, began one typical summer's day. Reading, writing, and preparing notes for class, the voice arrived, albeit quietly at first, a self-deprecating whisper. The voice soon became loud and controlling. Imagine, if you would, an invisible bully alone with you in a room. Its constant, repetitive, tormenting commands, judging me guilty of heinous acts, demanding my punishment. I heard imaginary gusts of wind, firmly slamming shut forever, doors to all my hopes and dreams. I heard the desperate pleas of destitute women, and always, always, that voice, wicked and cruel, its sole intention, only to do harm. On one occasion, panic-stricken, I ran to the bathroom. A single bulb, stark without shade, illuminated the space where I hoped to find solace in the mirror's reflection. Instead, an evil, sadistic woman, mocking and humiliating, grimly stared back. Convinced a microchip had been placed in my brain, I frantically gripped and pulled at my hair, searching for a scar. Helpless, frightened, and completely alone, I began to accept the voices were real. As the voices continued, unrelenting in torment, leading ever more to self-imposed isolation, eventually withdrawing from college friends and family. the need to seek out professional help was by now overwhelmingly apparent, but revealing to others my new state of mind was inconceivable and filled me with terror. Where did the strong, confident, independent Lisa go? The world that I knew had fallen apart.
As the months passed, the voice's unrelenting torment, its commands to harm, dominated my fragile mind. The main voice was soon joined by other sounds and noises. Washing machines and radiators, for example, seemed to speak an alien language only I could understand. These audible hallucinations were so intense, leaving me always confused and unable to cope. Cigarettes and alcohol suppressed these hallucinations a little, but were harmful crutches having to rely on. Seeking out professional help may seem the most obvious thing to do, but venturing into the outside world filled me with terror. The door now a barricade, the beast caged within. In retrospect, I'm so very glad to have found the courage to seek help. The alternative? Unable to work, failure to pay rent, homelessness, vagrancy, possibility of prison. Much too common to those who suffer with poor mental health. Although our relationship was troubled and fractured, my only recourse was to contact my parents. Perhaps wrongly, I read my mum's femininity as far too submissive to my dad's bossy nature, leaving home on bad terms. When I left, I was so self-assured. To now return home felt like a sheepish humiliation. Maybe it was a generational thing, but my father's approach was one of denial. My mother, however, took a different stance. She organised doctor's appointments, sat patiently in waiting rooms, listened attentively to their diagnoses. The differences we had were placed aside. The voices and noises became more determined to sabotage any hope of recovery, telling me, reminding me I would be scrutinized, dissected, my anonymity gone, all thoughts and secrets exposed to the world. But there's no greater fear than fear itself. With gratitude and thanks to the NHS, the mental health process is pretty straightforward. The doctors assured me my condition wasn't uncommon and referred me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist's diagnosis, based on one informal interview, finally gave a name to my now clinically confirmed illness. paranoid schizophrenia. Hearing voices a common element. Although some relief, knowing my illness had a name and not uncommon, now medically classed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Paranoid schizophrenic. Two simple words, but together a life sentence. Stigmatized throughout history as a danger to others. It was suggested at best I should forever remain silent.
She's not following them round
because her son
24/7.
just attacked
You're
her.
not going to know what they're up to.
Schizophrenic maniac hearing voices in their head commanding
Other
them
than
to
capital
kill,
punishment
going to
or
hit
locking them up for
California.
life,
They also
supervision
And
orders
paranoid
are
schizophrenic
always gone.
killers.
all he needed to do was kill people.
Schizophrenia is a severe psychotic disorder, normally beginning around the late teens or early 20s. In my case, I was 20 years old when the voices first arrived. This debilitating illness affects 1% of the population. Although 25% will make a complete recovery, 1 in 10 will die, usually by their own hand, within 10 years of being diagnosed. Considering the suicide rate in the UK is 1 in 10,000, this disparity in numbers is truly shocking. In public opinion, no other psychological disorder is more associated with violent behaviour than schizophrenia. Living as an outsider, in suspense of being found out, this commonly shared misrepresentation by the general public eroded my self-esteem over time. Sometimes it felt that the stigma was worse than the symptoms of the illness itself. A schizophrenic who had stopped taking his medication. Journalists, often lacking in imagination, perpetuate this myth of anger and violence without consideration of the possible consequences.
We went for a week-long break abroad. As the airplane took off, I suddenly remembered my medication, required to be taken daily, was still at home on my kitchen table. What began with moments of clarity, the round roofs of the Salute Basilica, stark against a blue and gold Venetian evening sky, soon became disorientated, disassociating myself from all surroundings as the chemical effects of my daily medication gradually wore off. Concluded 7 days later in what I now must accept is my natural, unmedicated state.
A combination of childlike innocence and unconditional love, but also fear and helplessness, unprotected from the hostile voices and threatening noises within. Without medication, rather than the misplaced perception of a tendency towards violence and anger, I placed all trust in the person whose hand was holding mine, guiding me from the London Tube station and hopefully home to safety. As well as a sense of guilt, my mother also felt responsible for my illness. She herself a victim of this very same stigma, a consequence of lazy journalism, which even today popularizes this misconception in regards to schizophrenia. Many of those who suffer from schizophrenia and take their own lives do so as a result of the stigma rather than the effects of the illness itself. The actual cause of schizophrenia still remains unknown. I believe in my case, the illness may have been a consequence of an extreme emotional trauma. A trauma so severe, medication alone could never cure. The last contact I had with my birth mother, the moment before the umbilical cord was cut, the nurse quickly carried me away to another room. These early separations damage the developing brain, leaving scars profound and lifelong. The cause of schizophrenia largely remains unknown. What is known is the disorder creates a chemical imbalance in the brain. For example, the body produces nicotine. Reduced levels of this naturally produced nicotine hinders thinking and decision making for the schizophrenic. This chemical imbalance also reduces the production of dopamine. Dopamine plays a part in controlling the movement a person makes, as well as their emotional responses. Doctors suggest this is why schizophrenics smoke up to 3 times more than the general public. The inhaled nicotine temporarily normalizing the sensory disruptions. Unsurprisingly, emphysema, bronchitis, and other tobacco-related diseases are 10 times higher amongst schizophrenics. Adverse effects of this chemical imbalance are paranoia, nervousness, fear, delusions, and hallucinations. In the dark, I could feel insects crawl on my skin, filled with disgust as maggots devoured me from within. Psychic vampires with the blackest of eyes, I'm draining away, my slender neck ripped and torn, blood-sucking, violent, repulsive, rotten fangs, decaying corpses of hideous witches, their stinking smell lingering in the still air. Expecting rejection, a constant burden to bear, unable to trust, sensing only betrayal. Each facade only a veneer, a gesture, a glance, always a motive.
Forming bonding relationships proved difficult, constantly drowsy due to heavy medication. I took a leap of faith and confided in a new friend at work. Shortly after, I heard laughter in the kitchen. Yes, Lisa, can you believe it? They should lock her up and throw the key away. The sense of betrayal stunned me. I was overwhelmed and left the job soon after. I met someone I really liked, and 2 weeks later informed them there was something important I thought they should know. He was relieved it wasn't something much worse. Telling him, he said, was an act of courage and tightened our bond. The preceding years had taught me it wasn't important I should tell everyone, but everyone I tell should be important. Petrified a child might inherit my illness, as schizophrenia tends to run in families, we painfully decided to forego children of our own. Did I make the correct decision? I met my birth mother many years later. She had a mental illness so severe it had been decided by others to separate mother and child at birth. Far more important than the decision I made is thankfully having the mental ability to choose. Sadly, due to her illness, something my birth mother did not possess.
Peering through spectacles, the psychiatrist delivered his diagnosis. There are 5 symptoms, of which showing 2 or more of these symptoms for at least 30 days can be diagnosed as schizophrenia. Delusions. The person believes something that isn't true. Hallucinations. Seeing and hearing things that exist only in your mind. Irrational and erratic communication. Abnormal hysterical behavior. Negative thoughts. I showed all 5 symptoms. The therapy available was inconsistent and sporadic, making it impossible to form a meaningful therapeutic relationship over time. Therapists came and went, lost in a faulty system. I was barely surviving. I befriended a schizophrenic lady, hauntingly beautiful. She took her own life. A sad, sweet victim, cursed by her demons. An offer of group therapy became available. It was at such a group I met Frank. Blind and schizophrenic, I shall never forget him. Frank shared with us that, given a choice between the two, he would rather be blind than schizophrenic. The desolation and emptiness he experienced as a schizophrenic eclipsed all else. Vulnerability allows others to implant false and negative thoughts. With my parents' support, I was treated by a private psychoanalyst. I still believe he gave root to false memories of sexual abuse and inappropriate parental behaviour. His dream interpretation of a vague dream recollection led to the wrong conclusion. A loathsome implanted memory based upon the distortion of a truth. I'll never forgive him or myself for considering these events as possible happenings. Imagine a bully always by your side, constantly tormenting and criticizing you. Is one example of my negative thoughts. Cognitive therapy has taught me negative thoughts aren't fixed, to avoid triggering such thoughts and not to jump to conclusions. Taking control of these negative thoughts has opened my mind to exciting new futures in life and in friendship. Friendship is grounded in respect and honesty. Therapy requires trust and understanding built over time. My psychiatrist has treated me for over 10 years. She is my sounding board. In an ideal world, we would have become the best of friends. Into the light.
I won't deny how frighteningly confusing it was to begin. Isolating myself from a cruel and judgmental world. Instead, seek out professional help, same as you would if in physical pain. Both are intrinsic to your good health and well-being. I really don't believe there is anything wrong with needing to be alone, away from distractions, to focus on what can only be sensed inwardly. Open your eyes to the countless stars. Rest your gaze upon a beautiful horizon. Lift your head once again and become bold. There is no need to apologize. We all need time for grace and solitude. How lovely it is to trust the kindly storm that clears our path. There comes a time to shed our skin, unburden ourselves from this false sense of perfection, to dream new dreams as we venture ahead. The bliss we can find when we abandon our fear of the unknown. We temper our fear of death. We accept bouts of sadness as a necessary part of the human condition. Become a guardian to a subconscious in which you can trust. Only by unshackling ourselves from the chains of despair will we truly find purpose in a world in which we deservedly belong. Choose belief. Dare to dream. Take that leap into the light.